So let's begin with some questions on the idea of the Sabbath as it's portrayed in the biblical text. And I just want you to kind of lay back and imagine if you never heard of this idea of the Sabbath and there was this notion that, okay, let's say you accepted the Bible's portrait of things, that the world was created in 6 days by this omnipotent God, this all-powerful God, and then there's this holiday, God takes off and celebrates this holiday, and the holiday is on the seventh day God rested, and then forevermore in the Torah, in the Bible, God commands his people that they're going to rest every seventh day like God rested after God finished creating the world. So if you just think about that notion, there are some strange things about it. Here are some strange things. Idea number one is, why would an infinitely powerful God really need to rest after creating the universe? Was God tired? One once gave the analogy, I think correct, that if you filled the entire Grand Central Station with dust, our Earth would be one speck of dust, hardly one speck of dust in the universe. But if you would imagine how difficult would it be for an infinitely powerful God to create such a thing, it wouldn't be difficult. You're infinitely powerful. So does God really need to take a breather? Does God really need to rest after creating a universe? It just doesn't sound like something an all-powerful God would need to do. So why did God feel like he had to take a break after 6 days? Okay, so that would be question number one. Why would an infinitely powerful God need to rest after creating a universe? What other questions are there? What other questions do you have when thinking about the idea, the biblical idea of God taking a break and resting and having this day off after creating the universe and celebrating that day off? You play God for a moment. Let's say you created a universe in 6 days, right? And let's say you wanted to make a holiday that you're going to command these poor mortal human beings you've created, that they're going to celebrate this holiday, and they're going to celebrate the idea of your creation, right? You've created this universe. You want them to always remember that you were the creator. You created the universe. They're going to have some sort of holiday to celebrate that. How would you ask them to observe that holiday? Well, I don't know about you. If I was playing God, if I wanted to celebrate my creating a universe, I would ask them to create something in commemoration of what I created. You could have everybody making these paper mache globes, and once a week everyone would make these paper mache globes, and they'd finish, they'd hold them up, and they'd say, "Wow, we created this," and it's this symbolic representation of the whole earth, and yay, look at us, and we'd all put that as a centerpiece on our table as we eat this great feast. Something like that. It would be nice. It would be inspiring, and everyone would think, no one would think this is crazy. Everyone would think this would be a great idea. But if you think about what we're doing instead, we're doing exactly the opposite of that. Instead of asking people to create something symbolic, we're asking people to rest. Why? Because God rested. Maybe that sounds normal because that's just the way we come to understand what the Sabbath is, but it is kind of strange. If you take it out of the theological context for a moment, you make an analogy from sort of normal everyday life. Let's say that we were a city council and we were all getting together and we wanted to celebrate something like Rosa Parks Day, right? That day that Rosa Parks courageously resisted the racist policies of her time, and she stood on the front of the bus and sat there, and we wanted to do something like, we're all going to have a Rosa Parks Day. So one day a week or one day a year, the city council says everyone's going to get together and do some sort of symbolic act to commemorate, Rosa's heroic ride. What would we do? Right, so you can imagine the city council debate. People would say, well, why don't we have everybody get on these buses and crowd onto these buses and crowd onto the front of the buses, and no one's going to sit in the back of the bus. And these buses careening all over the place, laden down with people in the front of the bus, and no one sitting in the back of the bus, and that's what we would do. It would make a lot of sense. It wouldn't be so good for the buses. It would cause some traffic problems, but it would make sense as a way to commemorate Rosa Parks Day. But imagine some guy in the back of the room, some guy over here says, no, I have a great idea. Here's what we should do for Rosa Parks Day. Instead of having everybody stand up on these buses and stuff, we should actually have people go home and take naps. Why should they take naps? Well, it turns out that, after Rosa's historic ride, Rosa was very tired. Rosa went home and she actually took a nap. So we too should be like Rosa. Let's take naps because Rosa took naps after her ride. We would think this is crazy. This is insane. This makes absolutely no sense. But this actually wins the day. The nap wins the day. This is actually how Rosa Parks Day is celebrated. This is actually the Sabbath. God, after creating the world, right? So he went and took a nap, so we too should take naps. It seems insane. We're not celebrating the nap, we're celebrating the creation. It just doesn't seem to make any sense. So the answer to this question, I think, is something equally astounding. I'm going to give you an answer, but the answer is just every bit as astounding as the question. And the answer is that if we think about it carefully, actually if you look back at the biblical text, the Sabbath actually does not commemorate God's creating the world. The Sabbath commemorates something else. Here's the text. Read it carefully. What does the Sabbath really commemorate? Well, the world was finished. I'm reading that from Genesis chapter 2. The world was finished. God finished on the seventh day, and he rested on the seventh day from everything that he made. And now listen carefully. And God blessed the seventh day, and he sanctified it. And now you're about to get the reason, key, because it's going to give you the reason. The reason that God blessed that day and sanctified it, because on that day he rested. The reason why God treats this day so special is actually because God rested. God is actually commemorating his rest on the day, not actually the creation. So what the Sabbath actually commemorates is not God's creation of the universe, interestingly enough, but God's rest. God himself is commemorating his rest. But then the question is, well, what's so important about rest that it should be commemorated? Who cares about rest? I would say it's theologically significant that God created the world. You want to have a holiday that God created the world? Makes a lot of sense. A holiday about God resting after creating the world? That's the incredible thing that we're celebrating. Why celebrate rest? It doesn't seem to make any sense. What is the big deal about rest? That, I think, is the great question that we need to figure out to understand what's happening at the most basic of levels in the Sabbath. There are a couple of other questions which I want to entertain with you about the Sabbath. Let's come back and put them all together. I'll see you in our next video.